In Wuthering Waves patch 2.2, we got access to a bunch of new echoes. Most of them are completely not worth the mention, but there are a couple that might be worth farming for if you're trying to play some specific characters. So let's get into it. The first echo that I have to talk about is the only original new forecast in this update, being Reminiscence Fleurdelys. Now, first of all, I'm gonna have to say what Reminiscence Fleurdelys does. So it does a bunch of AoE arrow damage, as well as giving arrow damage bonus to the equipper, being only 10% as opposed to the usual 12%. Also, it will give an additional 10% arrow damage when used by the aerorover or a mystery character in the future that, let's be completely honest, is going to be Cartathea. It is on the Gusts of Welkin set, which is a set focused around arrow erosion, but it is more of a supportive set, so clearly Reminiscence Fleurdelys is going to be for arrow erosion teams. It has no specific perks relating to arrow erosion itself, however. And I think for being the first echo that we talk about, it is already hitting us with a massive disappointment. Because I've said this in so many videos, man, but aerorover is just not a good character. Especially not now. And I've said plenty of times why I think aerorover isn't good, but let's just say it one more time. Especially when we talk about the Gusts of Welkin set, aerorover is just not a good character. First of all, in order to actually give the arrow damage buff, you need to be able to apply arrow erosion, something that aerorover cannot do unless there is other DOTs on the enemy, which means that either we're going to need a character that somehow synergizes with arrow erosion but applies something else, or this part of the kit is just not going to be used, meaning aerorover can't even activate Gusts of Welkin. And if you can't activate Gusts of Welkin, why are we running Reminiscence Fleurdelys? It's not like buffing up aerorover's damage with that 20% arrow damage bonus is going to be of much use here, because aerorover's damage is, to be nice about it, not exactly all there. So overall, I think this is a very weak echo on the aerorover specifically, especially when aerorover can just as easily run Rejuvenating Glow, and it's going to be better for the only teams that aerorover is currently usable in. Maybe we'll see a team in the future in which the aerorover can run Gusts of Welkin. However, currently it is basically useless. As for running it on Cartathea in the future, I am not entirely convinced, because here's the thing, right? Gusts of Welkin is a supportive set, which means that even if you farmed Reminiscence Fleurdelys for Cartathea now, you're not going to get a piece for Cartathea, because there is a 99% chance this character is getting her own dedicated set for a DPS Cartathea. So, sorry, but don't farm this one yet. Next, I want to talk about the other forecast added in this update, being the Nightmare Lampylumen Myriad. And Lampylumen Myriad in its base form is known to be quite awful, so let's see if the Nightmare version changes things up a bit. And oh boy, it sure does. For its skill, it's just going to summon the Lampylumen Myriad to do one hit of Glacio damage. It's not exactly a very strong hit of Glacio damage, although it does have a pretty nasty AoE to it. So overall, I'd say it's a fine echo skill, especially because it's a summon. Wastes no time. And additionally, it will give 30% coordinate attack damage and 12% Glacio damage, being on the Frosty Resolve set, as well as Empyrean Anthem. And let me tell you, I think Lampylumen Myriad is actually pretty good. It is definitely dedicated to one character, and we can all guess who it is. This is obviously meant to be a signature echo for Zhezha, which is kind of insane, because, well, Zhezha's already really good, we did not need to buff her, but hey, we'll take it. The thing about this echo that makes it a big improvement over Hecate is the fact that, well, Hecate only buffs the coordinate attacks, and while most of Zhezha's damage is coordinate attacks, it's still less than half. So the 12% Glacio damage bonus, buffing all of Zhezha's damage and not just the coordinate attacks, is actually bigger than you might initially expect. So you might lose 10% coordinate attack damage bonus, but guess what? In reality, you don't, because the 12% Glacio makes up for it, meaning that on your coordinate attacks you're getting 2% extra damage bonus. Meanwhile, on all your non-coordinate attack hits, you're getting 12% more. You're also getting more damage out of the echo itself, Because it does glacio damage and Zhezha is building for glacio damage, it automatically means that the damage of your Echo is also going up. So overall for Zhezha, it is a pretty big damage increase. This Echo is not without its faults. First of all, the fact that it's on 2 sets, one of which you do not want to farm it for. Frosty Resolve is a set for specifically Carlotta, and she has nothing to do with coordinated attacks. So Zhezha is the only real user of the Echo, despite it being on Frosty Resolve. And even if you're trying to play Zhezha on a main DPS build, you wouldn't be going for Frosty Resolve, you'd be going for Freezing Frost instead. So the fact that Lampylumen Myriad is on 2 sets makes it a bit harder to farm for, especially since almost every Zhezha in the universe is going to try and run a crit rate main stat. The only real exceptions are those with Stringmaster, which, to be honest, fair enough, you pulled for Stringmaster, you're kinda smart. Additionally, you also lose out on the fact that Hecate makes it pretty easy to parry some attacks, because Zhezha basically can't parry, and if you're trying to parry an enemy that's trying to attack you, you can't really do that with Lampylumen. The summon animation just takes too long, so you are losing out on the ability to parry as well, but I think that's more of a nitpick. And then finally, the last Echo that I think is worth talking about is the Capitaneus. Capitaneus is a free cost Echo instead of a 4 cost this time, being present on both the Gusts of Welkin set as well as Eternal Radiance. It does a bit of Spectra damage when you cast it, and it will give the wielder 12% Spectra damage bonus as well as 12% heavy attack damage bonus. Giving these 2 specific buffs already makes it good for Phoebe, but the question is, how much better is it compared to the Nightmare Morning Ix? Because we have to remember, Nightmare Morning Ix is not exactly a bad Echo, and because Capitaneus is a free cost, you would need to have a Nightmare Morning Ix anyway. So is it really worth the trouble to farm a whole extra Echo for your Phoebe? Well, it's a weird one. Capitaneus is in fact Phoebe's new best primary Echo. It is better than Nightmare Morning Ix, but the thing is, it's not by much at all. It is literally a less than 1% difference for your Phoebe, so you really do have to ask yourself, is it worth it for me to farm Capitaneus for a less than 1% damage increase towards my team's damage per rotation? Personally, I don't think that that's worth it. However, if you really love Phoebe, then sure, fair enough. I will say that at S3, because Phoebe gets a big buff to her heavy attack damage, Capitaneus will become better there. However, how many of us really have an S3 or higher Phoebe? An additional bit of headache is the fact that it's on 2 sets, being Eternal Radiance and Gusts of Welkin, so if you're trying to farm it in Overworld, literally half of your Capitaneuses are going to end up being worthless because they're on the wrong set. Unless you're farming it for aerorover, which, I mean, I've already said that Gusts of Welkin is a bad set for aerorover, so hey, that's beside the point. So in my professional opinion, I think that you should just farm your tacit fields as normal, and if you do end up getting a Capitaneus that's best in slot for your current build, put it in the primary slot to give yourself that heavy attack damage bonus. Remember, it's all about the substat quality, so if your Capitaneus is not good enough to be better than your currently existing free costs, then don't put it on the build just for the sake of that heavy attack damage bonus. It's not worth it. So what do you guys think of the new Echoes in patch 2.2? I think that introducing more Echoes into the game over time to buff older units is a very good decision, and I hope that they keep coming. I think getting new Echoes is some of the most exciting content for someone like me because it gives me more opportunities to min-max my builds if we do end up getting an upgrade for one of the characters I play. But that's just me. What do you think of the new Echoes? Be sure to let me know in the comments below, and while you're down there, subscribe to the channel and like the video. If you still have any questions, you can join my Discord, which is linked in the description. I'm pretty active in there, so if you ask a question, there's a pretty good chance I'll answer it. But that'll be it from me. Peace.